Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. Tensions between India and Bangladesh have reached a boiling point amidst fresh unrest in Dhaka. The assassination of a prominent anti-India youth leader, Sharif Osman Hadi, who died on the 18th of December after being shot earlier this month, sparked violent protests across Bangladesh, including attacks on media offices, cultural sites, and attempts to storm Indian diplomatic missions, with crowds chanting anti-India slogans and demanding the extradition of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The chaos coincided with the brutal lynching of Hindu garment worker Dipu Chandra in Mymensingh, initially blamed on blasphemy but now revealed as possibly stemming from a workplace dispute. Nobody really knows. It has, however, heightened fears for minorities in retaliation. A small protest outside Bangladesh's High Commission in New Delhi drew sharp rebukes. Dhaka threatened to scale back diplomatic presence, calling it a security lapse, while India dismissed exaggerated reports as being propaganda. As bilateral ties fray with mutual envoy summons and accusations flying, there are concerns which are growing over stability ahead of Bangladesh's February elections. That's the big story that we are tracking at this stage. Well, joining us now, Ambassador Veena Sikri. We're also joined by Sultan Mohammad Zakaria, Joint Convener and International Affairs Secretary of the National Citizen Party, and Professor Swaran Singh, Professor of International Relations at Jawaharlal Nehru University. The big question, however, is stability in Bangladesh. Remember those elections coming up in just a couple of months back, and the fear now that this may have a larger impact on relations between India and Bangladesh. Why did Bangladesh's Foreign Affairs Advisor, for example, threaten to scale back their diplomatic presence in India over what in India people are saying was a minor protest of just 20 to 25 people outside the Indian High Commission, especially when Indian authorities confirmed no security breach and a swift dispersal by police. This is one of the issues which are of major concern, since Dhaka's interpretation of that protest is very different. New Delhi saying that protest not very much, Dhaka saying that there were many other messages over there which were also conveyed. But the larger issue of a breakdown in law and order in Bangladesh, a complete crisis in that country, is something that needs to be looked at very, very closely indeed, particularly since it's unclear what is happening with these anti-India protests. Bangladesh has very close economic ties with Bangladesh. Joining us also in just a few moments, we'll have our panel, but we've got some breaking news coming in. Muhammad Yunus is now chairing a key meeting to restore law and order in Bangladesh. There have been discussions about the arrest and progress of investigations into those involved in the murder of the Inqilab state spokesperson and Shahid Sharif Osman Hadi, whose death triggered all of this violence in Bangladesh, a complete plummeting of the law and order situation. The chief advisor on behalf of the police has already identified 31 people after watching video footage on suspicion of attacks on 2 national, daily and 2 cultural organizations. The chief advisor has ordered the swift arrest of those involved in the murder of Osman Hadi and other illegal activities in Sunday afternoon's meeting which earlier took place. Ambassador Veena Sikri joins us now. Ma'am, to the larger issue of basic law and order in Bangladesh, given the fact that these protesters were completely out of control, the larger question remains, just who's really in charge?
Well, I think that is a very good question, and I think that it really shows there's complete anarchy in Bangladesh, complete anarchy. There is nobody in charge because there isn't a constitutional government. It's an illegitimate government. They were sworn in on a constitution which does not have a provision for an interim government, interim regime. And then after coming to power, after being installed on their own in this position, on the grounds of Muhammad Yunus being a Nobel laureate, it's done its best to postpone the elections. They started saying immediately that we're going to have no elections for 4 years, but first we must complete reforms. Now tell me, how can an illegitimate, unconstitutional government take on reforms? This can only be done by an elected parliament. Changes in the constitution can only be done by an elected parliament. And knowing this full well, the Muhammad Yunus is really been just the mouthpiece of the Jamaat-e-Islami. He has done exactly as the Jamaat-e-Islami wanted him to do, and Jamaat-e-Islami is the one who coordinated the regime change operation that ousted Sheikh Hasina at the behest of Pakistan, who had the Western powers behind them. So I think that that is why there's been a complete, well, turning the blind eye to the anarchy and mobocracy that has prevailed in Bangladesh. And right from the very start, the pattern of mobocracy was that, say, for example, the mobs will surround the Supreme Court justices, force them to resign, and a person supported by Jamaat-e-Islami will be installed in his place. The same thing has happened with the vice chancellors, the same thing has happened with professors, and it has been that way all along with an attempt to bring the Jamaatis to power. Their program to postpone the elections did not succeed because the people were demanding elections. The political parties, the BNP, everybody wanted early elections, and so elections have been called for February. But elections under whom? A caretaker government is supposed to be, according to when it was earlier in the constitution, is supposed to be headed by the immediate past Chief Justice of Bangladesh. And that is not so. The present person has been there for 18 months without holding elections, without maintaining law and order, without following any of the norms of an elected government. That is why there's complete anarchy in Bangladesh. And you have seen how, for example, the attacks on the Hindus and the death of Dipu Chandra 2 or 3 days ago in what can only be described as a barbaric medieval attack.
All right, ma'am, hold on for one sec. I've got Professor Swaran Singh, Professor of International Relations at Jawaharlal Nehru University as well. Professor Swaran Singh, do you believe that we are now potentially headed to a degradation of diplomatic relations between the two sides?
So it seems that given the fact that to some extent both sides seems to be engaging with each other through media, this could lead to a real derailment of relationship. But I assume there could also be possibility of certain amount of back channel conversations. We have had several mechanisms that connect two countries. But India will have to be very careful given the fact that we have had Osman Hadi's murder, another attempt being made on Mr. Sikdar, one Hindu gentleman was also lynched. So the things are really going out of hand. And in that sense, India will have to engage all stakeholders, including the interim government, and find out how can India help. At the same time, I think we have to be having much vigil on India's own border with Bangladesh, which despite all efforts, remains porous in many ways, and that allows Bangladesh to sometimes, pander to certain extremist rumors about killers having gone to India and so on. So I think India will have to deal with this situation at multiple levels of dealing with the interim government, looking at the border management, and of course, to some extent, also beginning to think of regional possibilities of BIMSTEC, for example, or even United Nations if things go really out of hand. And India's interest is that elections happen on time, and if they happen fair and free elections, so that a government with popular mandate can come to take decisions and then take control of Bangladesh. And in that sense, if worst case scenario elections get postponed, then the radical extremists will have much more stronger voice in building the narrative, which is increasingly becoming anti-India. And those kind of radicalization will definitely give advantage to countries like China and Bangladesh, who would like to sort of encourage that kind of narrative in Bangladesh, which is not good for India, because we don't want to go to the situation.
Right, and so let me just bring in Mohammed Ishraq from Dhaka. He joins us now. Mr. Ishraq, given the fact that there are extremely close dependencies between India and Bangladesh, the economic relationship, the people-to-people relationship, how is this benefiting anybody in Bangladesh?
Well, it is not. And I think the policy makers in both countries, they need to realize that for India's part, it has to recognize the July Revolution. Without recognizing the July Revolution as a revolution, nothing can go forward. So Bangladesh will not go back to the Hasina era. India has to recognize that reality, and based on that, both countries need to have a relations based on mutual respect. Both countries have to respect each other's red lines. And one of those red lines is handing over the fugitive, who is now in India, and oftentimes instigating violence through Telegram and other internet-based mediums.
Ambassador Veena Sikri, is that at all likely, India handing over Sheikh Hasina? There are those who fear that by the time she lands in the airport, she'd be lynched there and then, that there is no process of justice over there whatsoever. Besides the fact that the grounds for extradition may not exist at all.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, I would like to remind the speaker from Bangladesh that what happened in July, August was not a revolution. It was not spontaneous. It was not a students' uprising. And all this has been said by Mohammed Yunus himself. When he spoke last September in New York at the Clinton Global Initiative, he said, don't think it happened spontaneously. It was meticulously designed. And he introduced the mastermind, Mahfouz Alam, his own special assistant, who now later on became advisor in the government. So I think that is one thing to be recognized. This is a regime change operation, and I've already stated who was behind it. So the expectation to think that it's a revolution is not there at all. Secondly, as far as the extradition, your question on extradition is concerned, I think you're absolutely right, Vishnu, that this is not likely to happen at all. First of all, extradition is a very complex and legal process, which is being politicized by Bangladesh, because even last December or November, long before the court case even started, there was note about something, hand her back, extradition treaty, hand her back. So the point is that extradition has to be studied after a court case is conducted and the judgment, etc., is sent to India. The very court case has been done in what can only be described as a kangaroo court, which is not authorized to try Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, because it was a court meant to try only the criminals of the Liberation War of 1971. And the judges, as I just stated a short while ago, of this ICT had been changed. They had been surrounded and forced to resign, and convenient judges had been brought in by the Yunus regime. So I think that all this has to be looked into, and the provisions of the extradition treaty, as we know, are very clear, and they will be properly examined. So I think on extradition, this is not a quick process at all. And you're quite right that the point is that extradition also has to study what is going to happen. Will the person being extradited face any kind of justice? Is there justice? Are there courts? So I think all these questions come in very seriously, and so I think that process is a different one altogether. Okay. I agree that the relationship between Bangladesh and India is very important. We're two very close neighbors. Bangladesh shares a 4,000-kilometer border with India, and that is why on day one we had expressed our, after the regime change operation.
Okay, ma'am, just hold on. I'm also joined at this stage by Sultan Muhammad Zakaria, Joint Convener and International Affairs Secretary of the National Citizen Party, NCP of Bangladesh. Mr. Zakaria, I think the big question now is, in the run-up to the elections in February, which are so important for the future of your country, can we expect some sort of stability, or are we headed into a period of real anarchy, with or without the elections taking place?
Thank you for inviting me and my colleagues here. Of course, our expectation is a peaceful transition towards elected the government. But unfortunately, things are not always at the hands of the people of Bangladesh. We have interest and I think organized attempt cross-border to destabilize Bangladesh. So it will also depend on how Bangladesh is able to manage that.
No, but Mr. Zakaria, when you say that there are cross-border attempts to destabilize Bangladesh, what evidence do you have of that?
I think the question is what evidence we don't have. The ousted, the deposed dictator Sheikh Hasina publicly every other day releases her phone calls, so-called leaks, threatening to take actions against those who deposed her.
So just that I understand this was a leader of Bangladesh who was overwhelmingly thrown out by massive crowds in Bangladesh, is now so strong that sitting in New Delhi, she can trigger protests of this size?
No, she cannot trigger protest. What she can do and what she is doing is sabotage. and rally saboteurs and organized crime.
Okay, Professor Swaran Singh, is there any evidence of that?
Well, there are
foreign affairs.
There are courts.
Half a second. Professor Swaran Singh, that's a question for you, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vishnu. In fact, the Foreign Affairs Advisor, Tawhid Hussain himself, told the media today that though there are rumors of a certain kind of, for example, the attack on their High Commissioner in Delhi, he himself used the words, "I have no evidence for this." So, that is the statement which should show us that Bangladesh doesn't have any real evidence. And I agree with you, it's not possible that a prime minister whose army said they could not provide her security in Bangladesh is today sitting in Delhi and is capable to orchestrate things in Bangladesh. It's very difficult imagination to have. And I think let's also underline, India did not, sort of steal her out of Bangladesh. A request came from Bangladesh to, ensure her physical safety, and India has very limited role in that. India has said it's only for her physical safety that India is providing her facility to be in India until she finds an alternative place for political asylum. And initially, discussion was happening that she could go to London until United States negatively reacted to it. And in long term, I'm sure India looks at that as a possible, outcome of this situation where Sheikh Hasina could choose to go wherever she can, and India would be happy to facilitate that part. And I think that part is not often being appreciated by friends in Bangladesh, that India was not the country that took her out of Bangladesh. The situation was such that army itself could not ensure her safety. And, as a neighboring country, it's a responsibility if India can contribute to dousing certain kind of agitated minds by giving her a brief stay in the country. India did that.
All right. So I just want to keep the strike rotating. 1 second, just so that I can get more questions in. Mohammed Ishraq, to the issue of the death of Sharif Osman Hadi, given the fact that the local identification of assailants has been difficult, these were apparently people in a helmet, and the lack of all evidence suggesting, allegations of Indian involvement, where does the anti-India sentiment come from? What is it based on? What is it premised on?
I have to correct you. Although the person who shot Hadi was wearing helmet, but fact checkers and independent journalists, they have been able to find the person responsible and also the person who was driving the bike. They were both members of Hasina's party, and the shooter, his name is Faisal. He has participated in Awami League rallies even after 5th of August, before people chased them and they fled. They fled the protest. So these are like very short time protests.
Okay.
Right now, as of now, so there is no direct evidence linking India to it. I think the sentiment that the people has regarding India is that the idea that Hasina is instigating these terrorist attacks from India. It may be the case that Indian authorities may not be aware of this. For example, when Hasina makes these phone calls in Bangla, maybe Indian authorities do not know what she is talking over the Telegram and other internet-based channels. So that might be the case. But we also have to understand that the Hasina regime has long been supported by India, even when she was doing many terrible things, including enforced disappearances. So these issues, these very lingering issues, border killings, and so on and so forth. So when the elections were coming up, Indian officials were coming to Bangladesh and trying to manage the political scene as if India was the kingmaker in Bangladeshi politics. These sentiments, so they culminated in the sort of protests that we are seeing right now.
Half a second. Ambassador Sikri, you want to comment on that?
Well, I'm quite surprised to see your panelists from Bangladesh talking about this kind of accusation, because right on your visuals, you are showing the meeting chaired by interim regime leader Mohammed Yunus, and where the Home Advisor is informing the meeting that the killer is not known and has not been identified yet. and that the investigation is on. This is coming on your channel, on the visuals, to say that. And I think also I would like to draw attention to the statement by the DGP Police of Bangladesh, where he said clearly that there is no evidence that the killer has gone to India. So I think that the statements by the leaders of the same regime of led by Mohammed Yunus are saying different things. And the NCP is one party; it's not anymore in the regime. It's supposed to be now in a separate party. But I think they may not be aware of what their own regime, led by Mohammed Yunus, is doing. That's one thing. Secondly, I would like to say that there is absolutely no question about any kind of interference in the affairs of Bangladesh or India being in any way involved in running the government in Bangladesh, good, bad, or indifferent. It does not matter. It is running on its own. I would like to only say one thing, that Sheikh Hasina, in the interest of good neighborliness, recognized India's security red lines. And that is something which this regime, led by Mohammed Yunus, has been trying to cross that every single time. Your own leader, Mohammed Yunus, went to China and made a statement, oh, the Northeast, it's in our hands. We only have access to Northeast. We have seen the maps, even the person who was making maps of Bangladesh and greater Bangladesh, showing parts of Northeast in Bangladesh. These are not friendly acts. These are not acts of a group of people who wants good relations with India. And the kind of statements that have been made by each of the people campaigning in the elections shows very differently on how they want to have relations with India. India, on the other hand, has shown a great deal of strategic restraint in its dealing with Bangladesh. We have said that we are prepared to continue the economic cooperation that we've had before between India and Bangladesh, because it's mutually beneficial. Bangladesh has achieved 6.5 to 7% rate of growth every year. And right now, in the last 18 months, this has been halved to less than half. 350 factories have closed down because conditions of import-export trade have been completely destroyed. And there's unemployment, there's high inflation. Even the Bangladesh Bank statement, the Central Bank of Bangladesh, in its statement, gave a very dire picture of the state of the Bangladesh economy. But I think it doesn't interest the people of the NCP and others, because they think that the poorer the people are, the more they'll be controlled. So actually, the people of Bangladesh have realized that their condition was much better earlier, and they've been saying that repeatedly. And it's in response to this kind of popular feeling that is growing in Bangladesh that you have this response about the violence, about the killings, about the blame for India for everything. I think that we have to see how good relations are a two-way street. Right from the very beginning.
I think that's a good way to actually start wrapping this up. We want good relations with Bangladesh. I think Bangladesh wants those with us as well. But will the violence actually end? Because what we've seen over the last 1 week, absolutely horrific one way or the other. We leave it there. I'd like to thank all of you very much for being with us.